The best example of intimidation of a writer and scientist in my book is what happened to Bjorn Lomborg. And I hope that you're all familiar with the story of how Science and Nature, two of the most prominent scientific magazines in the world, went out of their way to try to destroy him. And in fact, went after the university press that published his book, The Skeptical Environmentalist. That's the kind of thing we're dealing with. I would disagree with Ms. Nova that there may not be a conspiracy, but there is an ideology based upon guilt about capitalism that motivates all these people in the same direction. You can predict what they're going to say before they say it, just as long as you know where they're coming from ideologically. Dr. Sununu said today that when the global warming people came to his office and started beating up on him, that he decided that to fix the problem, they would increase their funding. Have you ever heard of feeding the gator? That's essentially what's happened. We have billions of dollars in play, and scientists can be easily compromised by less than $100,000, trust me. As far as carbon profiteering, what could be better than to create a new currency for the world and be in charge of distributing it? It's like Indian beads suddenly have become gold cougarons. And as far as the PR situation, I think Ms. Nova put it pretty well. Magazines, press people, media people are in fact unreliable and generally as predictable as the other members of the collectivist left. There is a hero, however, in this story. And I remember him from when I was young, and I thought, you know, what a nice man. What a great voice. And he actually told me about the weather when I lived in Omaha, and he was on Channel 7. And he, after that, had a tremendous career, including international and national fame as the morning guy for the weather on a nationally broadcast network program. I don't know what the morning program was called at that time, but he was the morning news weatherman, and he was still charming, still had a great voice, and still gave me the weather. And now I find out in the last 2 years that he's a hero, a man of virtue, and a person who will stand up to the silliness of the left and the environmentalist movement, even when it might cause him some distress. John Coleman is my kind of man. I'm honored to be on this stand with him.
Push to start that. Or we start it when the time comes.
Want to start it right away? Or?
We don't, not yet.
Okay. So,
I just push there to start.
yeah,
Okay, that's fine.
full screen here.
That's fine.
And you just hit the space bar.
Yeah, okay. It is the greatest scam in history. I'm amazed, appalled, and highly offended by it. Global warming. It is a scam. With those words posted on my website a year and a half ago, I came out of the closet and into the spotlight as one of the skeptics about global warming. And when I came to this conference sponsored by Heartland a year ago, I began my talk with those words. This year, I begin my talk with this. Na, 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 na. Hey, 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 goodbye. Global warming, Goodbye. Yeah. You know, I first heard that song at White Sox Park back in my days when I was part of the eyewitness news team, the Happy Talkers on ABC in Chicago. But now I've heard it at sporting events all over the country. And it's a way for the victors to taunt the vanquished opponents. And for me, I think it's a pretty good way to say so long and goodbye to global warming. Na 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 na, na 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 na, hey, 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 goodbye. Goodbye, Al Gore. Goodbye, James Hansen. Goodbye, IPCC. Goodbye to the bad science and the silly claims of the global warming team. You know, many on our team have paid dearly with a loss of personal income, hurting their family, loss of professional standing, loss of acceptance by their peers because they stood up and debunked global warming. And I want to tell you what I am. I am a fan. I am here backing my team like any fan would. It was at this conference a year ago. I remember I, for the first time, had the opportunity to meet and mix a bit with the global warming debunker science team, and I felt like a fan who had sneaked down into the dugout, and there were the stars. And I wanted to ask for autographs. I held back a little. There's so many stars. You know, you start with the original, the old man of the debunkers, Fred Singer. You know, he's been fighting this battle since 1988. It has totally consumed his professional life. And he's strong at his age and fighting still. And there's Richard Lindzen. He has risen above smallness at his institution and seems to have managed to find a way to continue with their respect, but I know it's hard. And then I see a young man like Willie Soon, and I know he's taking such abuse. And then my dear friend Joe DeLeo, who his wife calls an American treasure, and I agree. But I know how his career has hurt. Well, that conference a year ago brought all of those people, hundreds of them together for the first time. And as individuals, suddenly they found themselves were becoming part of a team. And that has given great new strength to the debunking movement. And now there are hundreds of fine scientists standing strong with this team. And our side hasn't won the game, but hey, I think we've knocked out their pitcher. And we've battled from behind. And we could win. It's a long, hard struggle. The battle to bring an end to the bad science and the barrage of insults and their claims of we're going to have climatic calamity. But at last, Al Gore's outrageous global warming claims have been sidelined, and the other side has had to reinvent their platform and team name. The switch from global warming to climate change, and I think Al Gore and his sci-fi movie claims have been knocked out of the game. Have a nice shower, Al Gore. And as for the science, that error, that basic claim about carbon dioxide, CO2, being a significant greenhouse gas is very much on the ropes now. You know, it all seemed to be going so well for the team I call the Keeling Curve team. From the 1950s right up through the 80s and 90s, they were doing great. Roger Revelle had put together the first modern scientific paper speculating that CO2 was a significant greenhouse gas back in 1957. And then when he was a professor at Harvard, he introduced Al Gore to the carbon dioxide global warming theory when Gore was a student. And Al Gore wrote all about that and how Revell was his mentor when he wrote his book Earth in Balance in 1992. But meanwhile, Maurice Strong, an international gadfly of the United Nations, had latched on to Revell's research and had used it to form the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change as a vehicle to tax the developed nations for the benefit of the underdeveloped nations and start a one-world government. And the UN funding for the IPCC made it possible for them to construct their computer models and project the continued warming. Warming that was happening right up through the 1980s and 1990s, and they were flourishing. Everything seemed to be right on track. But all of this was providing the ammunition that they'd so needed for the environmental movement. And they latched onto it. And when the environmental movement latched onto it, so did the liberal politicians. And with the liberal politicians and the environmentalists and the IPCC, next came the media. And then Al Gore was awarded the Oscar, and the IPCC picked up the Nobel Peace Prize with him, and Gore even cashed in on his carbon credit. Some people say he made $100 million. And their case was on top of the world, but then it began to unravel. Na, 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 hey, 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 goodbye. What happened? What turned the tide? A major solar cycle had peaked in the 80s and 90s, it appears, and then the sun went quiet, very quiet. And that quiet spell continues today. Some will argue whether there is, in fact, a proved link between that solar cycle and Earth temperatures. And some will manipulate the temperatures, James Hansen, won't they, until they try to pretend that the cooling trend isn't there. But with sunspots at their lowest point in 100 years, and with the ocean currents flipped to the cold mode, global warming has ended. Global temperatures have started to nosedive, and now the models, those predictions have gone sour, and the so-called computer model proof of CO2 radiative forcing global warming has failed. The IPCC computer proof has gone poof. It's na, all right. Global warming, goodbye. Well, now, did you know that a National Rasmussen poll says that 51% of Americans no longer believe that the predominant cause of any climate shift is the activities of mankind? So when will Al Gore admit he was wrong and head for the shower? Well, don't expect him to retire quietly. Don't hold your breath. But here's a quote. In November, Mr. Gore said that he had failed with his documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, that it hadn't done his job. Quote, I feel in a sense I've failed badly, because even though there's a greater sense of awareness, there is not anything close to the appropriate sense of urgency. I think we've stolen urgency from him. Awareness, it's still out there. Yes, public opinion is turning, and Al Gore knows it. So for us, it is time to celebrate. And we have 650 dissenting scientists now listed with Senator Inhofe's list put together by Mark Morano. We have 31,000 scientists, 9,000 of whom hold PhDs, who have signed the petition debunking global warming. And the Heartland Institute has brought us together now for the second time, hundreds of global warming skeptics. We could go down to Times Square and get on those lighted bleachers, and maybe Richard Lindzen could stand out in front of the group and take out his phone and say, Al Gore, do you hear us now? And I think he does. I think he does. I have to honor Joseph Bast and the people at Heartland And now there's talk not only about an ad hoc association, but perhaps a real association. We have the mojo. We are in the game. Victory is not really ours, not yet. Do you see it, the light there at the end of the tunnel? I fear that that light may not be the sunshine of victory, but rather a train racing this way. Because while the science is on the ropes, Al Gore's wild predictions are failing, but the environmental anti-fossil fuel agenda from the environmental movement and the liberal politicians is racing toward, with the backing of the media, I should add, racing, and with big business aboard, because they've found a way to make money at it, is racing toward becoming law. So in Washington, not too far from where we are, they're in the progress of making the carbon footprint cap and trade law that will tax Americans for at least $650 billion a year. And the Environmental Protection Agency is on the very verge of naming carbon dioxide as a pollutant. So the anti-fossil fuel campaign's at full speed. We may have the public, we may have Al Gore on the ropes, but it's not over yet. Our victory is anything but certain. And that's why, as a rare member of the media who battles on behalf of global warming debunking, I promise to continue my work. And there's a great deal to do about that. Now, in the last year, you understand I have a full-time job. I'm a journalist and meteorologist on TV every day, predicting the weather, being one of those silly TV weathermen. And I can get pretty silly. It wins the audience. But I've written numerous papers and posted them. I've made over 100 speeches in the last year. I've appeared on 50 talk radio programs. I have talked about global warming on national television 10 times. So even though I'm not a research scientist, and I don't do any research, I'm not qualified to do any research, I am an eager student, and I continue to read the research papers, I continue to study, I continue to learn, and I'm doing the best I can. I did place around the room my latest written speech, which many of you found, I think, at your spots. There's some back there on the table as well. And here's an interesting story about that. I wrote that, posted it on my website, and Matt Drudge picked that up and put a link to it on his website. In 3 days, 400,000 people had read that speech. I mean, here I stand in this room of 120 or whatever, and I'm proud to be here. But think of the power of the internet, that speech reached 400,000 people in 3 days. Folks, we have power. We just need to use it. We need to find ways to get the work of our scientists explained in such a way that the public can grasp it, and then get it linked to websites that are read by millions. And I do have a little demonstration to give you of the kind of work that I can do on television. A very interesting thing happened in San Diego last week. Was it in response to the coming of this conference? Was it in response to that paper that 400,000 people had read in the previous couple of weeks or month? I don't know. But the Scripps Oceanographic Institute, which of course is one of the most important research organizations in this global warming process, had a celebration where they awarded the first Roger Revelle Prize to Al Gore, and they brought him to San Diego. And this is the way it played on television on our station.
Former Vice President Al Gore is set to be honored tonight in San Diego for his environmental work. The award will be handed out at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. KUSI's Tom Jordan is live in La Jolla with more on this for us. Tom.
Alan, we are just around the corner from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, where Al Gore is expected to be the first recipient of the Roger Revelle Prize. He's being honored tonight for his work in environmental preservation. Now, the event actually started at 6 o'clock with a reception on the grounds of the institution. Gore himself expected to receive that award and speak after receiving that at about 8:30. Now, the award presented at this dinner marking the 100th birthday of the late Roger Revelle, who headed Scripps Institution of Oceanography from 1950 to 1964. Gore studied under Revelle at Harvard University in the 1960s, and he credits him for igniting his passion for the environment.
It's well known throughout the Scripps community here at Scripps Institution of Oceanography that Roger Revelle had a great influence on Al Gore. Roger Revelle was very free in teaching the entry-level classes at Harvard University, of which Al Gore was a student. And Al has always credited Roger Revelle with being his first inspiration for dedicating his life to promoting the environment and actually saving the planet and doing better things for it.
And again, the event is underway here at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Al Gore again expected to take the stage at 8:30 to receive that prize. And the events celebrating the 100th birthday of Roger Revelle continue throughout tonight and also tomorrow, which is the actual birthday. That is open to the public starting at 11 o'clock. Of course, tickets are about $11 for that event and for the institution itself. We are live tonight in La Jolla. I'm Tom Jordan, KUSI News.
All right, Tom, thank you. And John Coleman, as many of our viewers know, advocates there is no significant man-made global warming.
That's right. His research on the impact that Roger Revelle's research had on Al Gore provides some startling insights. John?
Well, Revelle was a powerful man, a noteworthy person, a scientist, a significant force in San Diego in the 1950s. And there's no doubt that he is largely responsible for the high status of the Scripps Institute of Oceanography in its field, and for locating the University of California, San Diego, UCSD, in La Jolla. While serving as director of Scripps, Revelle and one of his researchers wrote the first modern scientific paper that linked carbon dioxide released in the air from the burning of fossil fuels and the greenhouse effect and the warming of temperatures. Well, this triggered an avalanche of research that eventually became the impetus behind the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the entire global warming movement. In the 1960s, Revelle moved to Harvard to establish a Center for Population Studies. This is where Professor Revelle encountered student Albert Gore. He involved Gore and his classmates in the tabulating of data from a carbon dioxide study. Gore was so impressed, he wrote about it in his 1992 book, Earth in the Balance. That became the story for the movie An Inconvenient Truth, the Oscar and the Nobel Peace Prize, and some people say $100 million all came from that. There is no doubt Roger Revelle had a major impact on Vice President Gore's life. But there's a twist. In 1988, Roger Revelle was having second thoughts about whether carbon dioxide was a significant greenhouse gas. He wrote letters to 2 congressmen about it. And in 1991, he co-authored a report for the new science magazine Cosmos, in which he expressed his strong doubts about global warming and urged more research before any remedial action was taken. At that point, Mr. Gore pronounced Revelle senile and refused to debate global warming. He continues to refuse to debate. Many offers of thousands of dollars have been made for debate. He refuses. Today, Gore sequestered the media at this event, and he set forth rules: no questions, no interviews. I have learned that in 1991, Roger Revelle made what was his final speech at the high-powered, very private summer enclave of powerful men and politicians at the Bohemian Grove in Northern California. There he apologized for his research, for sending so many people in the wrong direction on global warming, and he worried about the political fallout from the UN IPCC and Al Gore. A man named Don Michael Schmedman, who lives in the San Francisco area, was there that day, and he remembers the Revelle speech very well. He has told me about it in some detail. So think of the irony. Today, Al Gore received the first Roger Revelle Award, honoring the man who sent him on his global warming campaign. But Revelle had realized that it was a false alarm and that the science was flawed before he died. Revelle passed away of a heart attack in 1991. It would be very interesting to know, if he had lived, where he would be tonight. Would he have approved of this award? Or perhaps would he be joining me for the International Conference on Global Warming Skeptics in New York next week?
John, I've covered the Gores over a period of years, starting with Al Sr., but Al Jr., is this a political or scientific point of view, do you think?
Well, for me, it's not political at all. After all, I'm a journalist in addition to being a meteorologist, and I absolutely refused to take political sides. Mr. Gore served honorably as vice president. He got 52 million votes for president, and I can't criticize that. But the science behind global warming scare, it is clearly wrong, and it needs fixed. And so I work day and night trying to fix it.
I'm just curious as to why he would never do any debates on this subject.
Well, because he knows he'd lose. Frankly, I think he realizes now that it's wrong, but he has this environmental agenda that this drives, and he doesn't want to get away from that.
Too much is invested in this.
Yeah.
By the way, you can read this whole story on our website in Coleman's Corner.
All right.
John.
Na 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 na. Hey hey hey. Goodbye. Thank you.